Civil Defence of Emergency, or gave lead into yesterday and this morning, there was an additional period of intense rainfall experienced overnight that was heavier in some areas, particularly up in the northern parts of the region, but spotty again right across. And as a result, we've had landslips and flooding, which has closed multiple roads in the region, including sections of both routes of North State Highway 1 and State Highway 16. Access is being restored, but it's difficult to maintain due to the ongoing weather and additional landslips. So, there is a real challenge for us just with that groundwater saturation and any amount of rain coming in over the top is causing issues, particularly in places around stability. We have had reports of severe flooding and landslips impacting rural areas, and our Auckland Group Welfare Coordinator has been in contact with both MPI and the Rural Brigades of Fire and Emergency New Zealand to reach out to other sectors to see what we can do to help that rural community or whether they need support. And we do stand ready here to help if that is needed. There is information, as always, on our Auckland website on rural support if our rural communities are needing to access that. Auckland Airport has advised that they continue to experience delays and cancellations, which is impacting passengers that are already within their terminals. So flights, of course, have slowed down, both coming in and going out for a period of time, and we do have passengers that have been in the terminal for a wee while waiting for their outbound flight. So again, just a message from them around checking flight information before heading to the airport, just to make sure that the flight's still going ahead. And if you're picking up passengers, if you can do that in a way that you minimise, the volumes of people going into the airport at this time, that would be much appreciated. Aucklanders are also being advised to avoid swimming in beaches due to possible contamination. The Safe Swim website is a great source of information around the current condition of our beach areas and whether they are in fact suitable to swim at. Our Healthy Waters team at Auckland Council has advised that all Auckland beaches actually have been moved to that black status. So at the moment, stay away from swimming at any beach. We've also received some reports that there is some debris that's washed down into some of our coastal areas, so care should be taken if you're out on boats in the water at the moment as well. So you may not be swimming, you might be boating, but just some potential for navigational risk there. I'm now going to pass over to Georgina. She's going to just share a little bit about what we can expect in terms of upcoming weather.
Kia ora. So yes, I'm with the Met Service team. Our severe weather forecasters are working really hard on behalf of Aucklanders, but also other regions that are also impacted by this current event. So today is actually the pause day for weather for Auckland, believe it or not. Had a bit of a rough night in the north last night, and elsewhere in the southeast, spotty thunderstorms across, but localised the rest of the region. Going ahead, we have already issued the next batch of severe weather warnings. We have another heavy rain warning in force for Auckland. This kicks in from about 6 p.m. Tuesday night, with the rain spreading in from the north. People in central Auckland and south Auckland expect to see that rain somewhat later. The risk period is another 12 hours, so 6 p.m. Tuesday night through to dawn Wednesday. We're looking at about the same volume of rain and again the risk of downpours. So you could expect 60 to 80 millimetres of rain to come in that period north of the bridge. For places north of Orewa, we could see 80 to 120 millimetres of rain in that region. This is the area that got hit hardest last night. Additionally, we're going to see some high intensity rainfalls associated with thunderstorms. It's been causing us problems for the last few weeks. We will see some high intensity falls, 25 to 40 millimetres in an hour, half an hour, which, no matter where they happen in the Auckland region, will cause localised flooding and impact. So our concern, of course, is that Auckland is really vulnerable to rain. We're completely saturated, our rivers are up, groundwaters are up. This is a very small rain warning compared to what we would normally care about. So the amount of rain, not such a biggie in the historical context. It's not going to look like Friday. However, it doesn't need to. Okay. Aucklanders, I suggest if you're vulnerable or need to do some work today around the property, do it today or tomorrow morning before that rain returns. Another important piece of information is the fact that the next event, so from Tuesday afternoon in the north and spreading in to the rest of the region, the northeast gales look pretty up there, okay? So gusts to 80 k's an hour, 90 kilometres an hour. Now, given the saturated soils, that is likely to cause tree fall more than normal, okay? We don't typically worry about winds of that magnitude particularly, but particularly East Coast Bays, Whangaparoa and north of Orewa, those winds may cause some wind damage to trees, etc., given the soil saturation. So we've got a bit of lead-in time. As mentioned, Met Service has already issued those warnings and watches for rain and wind. I suggest if you have concerns or questions for us, hit us up on social media. We're happy to help, and as always, we'll monitor and update those warnings every 12 hours. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgina, and also for that offer for questions around weather-related forecasting. I guess just one of the things that I'd like to reflect on is that we have got some really good advance notice of the warning being in place, so that extends right through until the early morning Wednesday. So we will be using our usual channels to push that message out there. There's plenty of notice there, so it's not a case where we need to send out something immediately to advise people. There will be just the use of usual channels, and really appreciative of having media here today to help with some of that advance notice of the fact that we do have that more adverse weather coming and need to prepare for that. We're coming to the end of a long weekend here in Auckland, and I know people are thinking about what it means to either return back to Auckland from where they've been staying perhaps, or back to school or work tomorrow. And it's fair to say that it remains quite a volatile situation. So as Georgina's just described, we've got an active weather situation still happening. Fortunately, the rain is looking like it won't come until sort of later afternoon tomorrow evening, and but then of course we've got wind following up behind that. So we do have a compromised transport network at the moment with several road closures, and additional rain is not likely to be helpful with that. So to that end, I'm going to get Andrew to share an update from Auckland Transport and just give a bit more information about what you can expect in terms of any journeys that you need to take over coming days.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, katoa. Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to really just express that our thoughts do go out to Aucklanders, especially those that have been hardest hit by the flooding and have had access to their properties or their places of residence impacted. Yesterday, I did thank Aucklanders for their ongoing patience in terms of their travel plans and how they move around the network, and that remains in place today. I thank Aucklanders for their ongoing patience as they go about their business and try to move around the network. We are doing our utmost best to keep both Aucklanders and people visiting our region moving. With more rain, as you've heard, anticipated over the next 48 hours and longer, we are expecting our roads and our public transport network to remain under pressure as it already is. That will be even more of an issue as we move into tomorrow and we see some return to our normal peak travel times. I guess that goes to the point of just requesting that Aucklanders think about and plan their travel in advance before they head out on journeys, and travel only where it's absolutely necessary. I would stress that our network is operational, so the roads by and large are open. All of our key arterials are running, although there may be limitations in terms of traffic management and detours to some of those. Our public transport network is operational and will be operational tomorrow, with the exception of trains, of course, that are not running today. The Western Line and Eastern Line trains have had slips, and therefore services will be affected. I'll reiterate that KiwiRail are continuing to work at pace to clear those tracks and restore services. Now, one of the things that hasn't been touched on yet, there are wind warnings in place tomorrow evening. That has an impact for the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and those wind warnings do mean that there's a potential for closures to the Auckland Harbour Bridge. So as you plan your movements and your travel, please bear that in mind and keep an eye on the different information channels to keep constant updates. One of those is the AT website. As I've talked about, our networks are open, but there are some restrictions. So I want to just touch on some of the areas where we would recommend trying to limit or minimise travel in terms of roads that you should avoid. So I just want to run through a couple of roads. Mill Flat Road, Tahekaroa Road, Aotearoa Road, Great North Road. While Great North Road is open, significant restrictions in terms of the number of lanes available. So it is open, but there will be an impact to your travel times if you have to or need to use Great North Road. Shoal Bay Road on Great Barrier Island. Scenic Drive has had 3 very large slips, and therefore it is closed, and we have managed access in place for residents. Glenvar Road, Otitori Road in Titirangi, and Sherwood Drive in Patamahoe. Those roads are best to avoid if at all possible. There are a couple of intersections I would like to add to the list where we have seen significant storm damage, and contractors are working to try and repair those intersections to full working order. So those 2 intersections I would like to just highlight. One of those is the Wirri Station Ross Common Road intersection, and the other one is in the city College Hill Victoria Street Beaumont intersection. Best to try and avoid those in your travel plans if at all possible. That is about all I really wanted to cover off. If Aucklanders or anybody are picking up issues on the network with respect to additional slips or issues on our roading network or public transport network, please go and log that either on our website, where we have an ability to log a fault, or call the Auckland Council or the Auckland Transport call centres. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So I guess a key message there just around, again, considering requirements to travel. So businesses operating for the next couple of days, thinking carefully about operational requirements and just making really informed decisions about working arrangements and what travel is absolutely essential. One of the other things, just on that vein of travel, and I did touch on this yesterday just a little bit, was just I guess that perhaps interest in going and looking at some of these areas that have been impacted by the storm, particularly the slips, which can look quite different and be something of interest to people. But we really want to make sure that people stay safe, and going into areas where there's been obvious ground disturbance is really not a good idea, and we don't want people going out into those places generally. So again, just really thinking carefully about what you get up to. And it's not just the ground, also thinking about going to areas where you might have issues from above. So staying around away from sort of cliff faces and things like that. It sounds obvious, but just a reminder for people that those are the sorts of things that right now it's really not wise to go and do. I think that's us in terms of really getting to the end of our formal briefing this afternoon. We will be back again at 4 o'clock with more information as it comes to hand. But if there's any questions now, I think we're happy to take those. We've got time to take a couple.
How prepared is Auckland to take the volume of heavy rain that's forecast?
Well, that's quite a big, it's a big challenge, obviously. The last couple of days have really tested us. One of the things that we do is we're working really closely with, as we do in any response, our agency partners that manage all aspects of infrastructure and lifeline utility. The reports that we're getting back from our partners in the lifeline sector is that at the moment they're coping well, that there is some resilience there. We've been fortunate to be able to bring in additional resources. So Fire and Emergency New Zealand this morning was talking about some of the additional resources they've been able to mobilise into Auckland, but also some of the other parts of the country that are also gearing up for some unpleasant weather to make sure that we've got that response capability, including some of these specialist services focused on, water recovery and things like that. We also have an additional 2 teams, I understand, that have come in to support any USAR requirements. So that's something that we're working on all the time. We've got some other events happening, and we work together as a network, and it's fantastic to have Roger here, who works with our National Emergency Management Agency, again, who's also looking at how they can support us where we have needs.
Auckland Transport question. I understand that Auckland Transport is not issuing fines anymore. Is that correct?
Auckland Transport is focused on ensuring that there is an ability for people to move around the network. So we are heavily focused on addressing parking issues that relate to safety on the network or an inability to move safely around the network. So I wouldn't go so far as to say they're not issuing fines. We are and will tow vehicles that create an issue or a problem on the network. And just to touch on that, we've had to tow several hundreds of vehicles that have been damaged and submerged in floodwaters over the last few days. So we're focused on towing. Infringements will only be undertaken if the offending vehicle is causing a significant safety concern or an issue to the free flow and movement of people across the network.
What has been done differently in the last few days to make improvements?
With respect to what, sorry?
With respect to the flood response.
The focus on?
The focus on, for example, like how infrastructure, is there any improvements being made, or like emergency alerts being sent out? Is there better communication behind the scenes to ensure that those alerts are being sent out now in case we see what we did on Friday?
Is that a question specifically for Auckland Transport?
I can probably take this one. Yeah. So again, look, I think the focus for us at the moment is we're in the middle of a response, and it's clear from the forecast that we've just been given that we're not out of the woods yet in terms of needing to be geared up for doing things that might arise as a result of more rain and more wind coming. We always look back on a response and take the learnings from that and look at how we can do things differently in the future. The recovery planning for this event is already underway. So we start the recovery process pretty much as soon as the response steps up, and that looks at things like that looks at what we can do differently in the future. Improvements right now, or things we're doing differently right now. We've heard from Andrew about the work that's happening out to clear. Obviously, working really hard to clear the roads, get them operational. We've got teams out working on storm-related debris on parks. We've got our Healthy Waters team clearing debris from streams, so there's a lot of work happening on the ground. But in terms of sort of business improvement, that's the type of thing you probably really expect to see once we're out of response, because our focus really is on the here and now, making sure we're doing the things we need to keep people safe right now.
We understand that there are a lot of people just in their communities going around clearing drains themselves because obviously it is really inundated at the moment. Is that something you would recommend?
But I think it's fantastic when communities step up and help out with these types of events. In fact, it's one of the things that makes, I think, probably not just New Zealand, but many countries really come together as these types of emergency events. They can bring communities together. So if people can get out there and they can do things proactively in their communities in a way that's safe for them and safe for others, then that's always helpful in these types of situations. But I guess the key message there is we don't want people putting themselves at risk. And if there are things that need to be cleared or material that needs to be removed, then we encourage them to get in contact with us so that we can do that the right way if it's a situation that could cause danger or risk to them. Also really mindful that some of the debris that might be out and about could be contaminated with wastewater. So again, just taking care when handling things out that sort of nature, washing hands, wearing protective gloves, that kind of thing is also really advised.
On that note, do you have a message to people who have been under that playing in floodwaters?
Well, again, I wouldn't advise playing in floodwaters. That definitely is a very strong message, and in fact, even shallow floodwaters can present quite a significant risk. So it doesn't need to be deep to be dangerous, and so I think the very strong message is don't go out in floodwaters. we don't want people putting themselves at risk. But if people have been out and in contact with that water, I mean, the first thing to do is making sure that you're exercising good sanitary practice, cleaning, washing clothes, and those sorts of things.
I've just got another question about the infrastructure. Can you explain more on like preparations being made to help the infrastructure cope for the coming rain?
Right now, there are some, the scale of this event has been significant. So this morning I think I mentioned, just to highlight this, I guess, we had 2 properties that were evacuated, that had flood-related damage overnight. So actually floodwaters coming into homes. One of those was down in Glenbrook, and the other was in Avondale. So, things are happening right across the region, and that is, of course, stretching the different teams, organisations that need to do things out on the ground. The way that we deal with that is a prioritising approach. So, people may see some things out on the ground that haven't been attended to. The likelihood is that is because it's been deemed less of a priority than perhaps something else that really needs to be addressed. So we prioritise the work that we're doing, but rest assured we have got a lot of people out on the ground doing the best that they can to get roads clear, to get drains cleared, to remove storm debris, to even things like removing risky trees. We've got a number of trees that have been identified as being sort of high risk in terms of sort of fall or limb shed, and so those are the sorts of things we're working on. It's quite a diverse range, but lots of focus. Reinstating our water supply in different areas where they've been affected. Utility companies working on power. Lots of work happening.
Do you have an update on the number of properties red and yellow sectored?
Yes, I do. We have, and this is, I guess, current as of this morning, because it changes, of course, probably every 20 minutes, which is the time frame it takes for our assessors to visit a house. But at the moment, as of this morning, 40 properties had received red placards, 151 had received a yellow placard, and 366 a white placard.
I've got a question around emergency alerts. Why did we receive one on Sunday and not on Friday?
I covered that off this morning, so quite different context. The alert last night was in response to a thunderstorm warning that had been issued. Thunderstorms can move very quickly. They can bring quite short duration but intense rain bursts, and we know that at the moment, with the ground conditions we've got, that can really cause issues. That might not be the case in normal times, but at the moment, that's the situation we find ourselves in. The event that we had on Friday was one that escalated very, very quickly, and the magnitude was not one that had been predicted. So, really just the time frame we had leading into that was quite different. Again, just reflecting on the fact that we have another weather warning out at the moment for tomorrow through to Wednesday morning. At this point in time, we may not use the emergency management alert system because we have plenty of lead-in time to give people advice about that warning using normal channels. So this is one opportunity to share that message. We have got a weather warning in place that may change over time, it may be updated, but people should be keeping an eye on the weather using the normal channels, Met Service, the news, our social media channels, and keeping themselves up to date with that. I think one more, and then we'll call it. If anyone's got another question.
We've heard of reports of people around the Franklin area, who never received an alert yesterday. Are emergency management aware of any issues with the alerts reaching certain communities?
Look, the alert system is one tool to reach communities. It's not going to reach every single person every time. The way it works is it uses cell phone towers to reach cell phones in the vicinity. Not all cell phones are capable of receiving those messages. If you're out of signal, obviously that might impact the ability to pick up that message. And also it is related to the cell phone tower or network in that area and how we set those messages up. So again, we only try and use those when we absolutely need to, and where possible ring fence those to the areas that we get, the information steers us towards. And like I said, Yesterday's alert was really in response to a thunderstorm warning, which can be associated with very fast-moving, flashy waters, a flashy rainfall, which could cause issues right now. For tomorrow, we've got lead-in notice. We know that something's potentially going to happen. We just don't quite know the exact nature of that. Please, just the reminder is to everyone, keep an eye on the weather for the next couple of days.
And for people in those kind of rural communities, how can they keep up to date with the latest information if they aren't getting those mobile notifications?
Well, like I said, the EMAs, or the emergency management alerts, are just one tool. They are not a fail, they are not necessarily going to guarantee that you get the information every single time for those range of reasons I've described. I would just really encourage people to use the standard channels that they get their weather information through. So whether that be social media, Met Service has got a social media page, Auckland Emergency Management does. We have our newspaper and our news channels as well that always share those weather alerts or information as it changes. Thank you, everybody. I think we'll end that there.